Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by asking you to think just for a bit about the following situation. You're talking to someone when you realize they're not listening to you, although they keep nodding their heads in agreement. Have you ever felt pressure to hurry up with your thought just because the person in front of you looks bored or impatient to hear you out? What about winning a conversation? Have you ever thought more about your reply than what the person in front of you is actually saying? Ladies and gentlemen, nowadays, it is just difficult to listen. Studies show that we spend from 70 to 80% of our waking hours in some form of communication. 9% writing, 16% reading, 30% speaking, and 45% listening. Studies also show that most people are poor and inefficient at listening. So it turns out that we spend most of our time communicating inefficiently. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I consider this a waste of my time. We have lost our ability to truly listen because we find comfort in the easy feed of communication. Isn't it easier to text your friend for graduation instead of physically picking up your phone and saying, "Hey John, congratulations my friend, well done"? We interrupt, we jump to conclusions, change the topic when it's not of our interest, and suggest advice when not requested. And it's not because we're bad people, oh no. There are reasons for poor listening. And for the purposes of this talk, I have summarized 3 for you. Number 1, lack of training. We are trained to write, read, speak, but no one teaches us to listen. In schools, no teacher ever comes to you and says, "Now, darling, I will teach you how to become a good listener." No, they're so focused on forming readers, writers, and speakers that nobody cares about shaping good listeners. Reason number 2 is that our speed of thought is faster than our speed of speech. We tend to speak at the rate of 125 words per minute in average, while we have the capacity to understand 400 words per minute, which leaves a lot of room for distraction. Just think about it for a second. Reason number 3 is that we are just born poor listeners. Research shows that after a 10-minute talk, within the next 48 hours, we retain only 25% of the information. Now add that to the insufficient training and the innate inclination to get distracted and see how much energy you truly have got left to listen. But it is not easy to listen. It is actually a very tough job. I, however, think that as social beings, we should not lose our ability to listen. My talk today draws upon Simon Sinek's ideas on the importance of listening, embellished in my own personal views and experience. I teach in the Plovdiv University, Paisi Hilendarski, and have been teaching for the past 7 years. I had not studied to become a teacher, but in a very short period of time, I became a very good teacher, in fact. So I was teaching more classes, different subjects, gaining a lot of confidence, and at one point I thought, what can I do to become a better teacher? What makes a good teacher? And why had I been achieving all this success when I had never studied to become a teacher? So I began looking for the answer, and there it was. A special connection between me and my students. They found me fun and attractive as a young and energetic teacher, but I had achieved this success because I had listened to them. I had paid attention to each and every student in my classroom. And then it came to me. No one has time to listen to these kids at school, at home, and all they want is for someone to genuinely hear them out. So once uncovered, my teaching success helped me achieve higher and faster results. And honestly, it was great. So I was gaining a lot of experience, engaging my students in creating online content, publishing their videos, listening to their stories, and everything was going fantastic. Until one day, after I finished class, I'm packing my things, and one of my students comes to talk to me. My students like talking after class. So he comes to me and he asks me a question. And of course, I produce a long and extensive answer, as good teachers do. And he just stared. I stared back. I summarized my thoughts for him, and he continued staring. I could see in his eyes that he was not happy with my answer. And honestly, I wasn't either. What had just happened? Suddenly I felt like a bad teacher. He was not happy with my answer, and I had no better answer because I had heard him but hadn't listened. That day, I went home a bit disappointed at myself. I didn't know what exactly had gone wrong, but I sure as hell knew that I had to do something about it. That same night, I had another wake-up call. I was talking to my mother over the phone when suddenly I caught myself drifting off again. She was talking to me about something important when she suddenly asked a question. And once again, I didn't have an answer because I had stopped listening. At that point, I felt twice as bad. Not only had I not listened to my student attentively, but I had not been paying attention to the most important person in my life, my mother. That was when I realized that I had been teaching so much, explaining, repeating things 1,000 times, that I had stopped listening. If you listen too much, you're not able to speak. But if you speak too much, you are not able to listen. I had to do something about it. So I did. I decided to be present in the moment, not the past, not the future. And that is how I began to listen. You would be amazed how much people have to say, even more than should be said to a teacher. All you have to do is listen. Now, with mothers, it's a bit more difficult. I still mess up from time to time, but I honestly do try hard. Nobody is perfect. We, as human beings, are designed for continuous growth. But remember, you grow not when you speak, but when you listen. To put a ring to my talk, I would like to suggest 3 steps for anyone willing to try this with me. Let's consider them as levels. Level 1, learn to take turns. Sociolinguistics studies human communication from different aspects, and one of them is turn-taking. Turn-taking between speaker and listener. Good communication is based on balanced turns. When you're a speaker, you speak. When you're a listener, you listen. Knowing your role in communication is key. Level 2, don't listen with the intent to reply. We're so opinionated sometimes that we forget that we're in the roles of the listener, not the speaker. Instead, try to summarize the speaker's thoughts rather than formulating your own response. One of the most difficult things in life is to listen without the intent to reply. And level 3, learn to speak last. This one has 2 main benefits. When you hear people's opinions first, you make them feel heard and important. And number 2, you get to filter all that information before you have your final say. No matter of your profession, being a good listener is priceless. It is the key to productive negotiations and the main ingredient to any healthy relationship. I encourage you to start by taking your turn to listen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to me today.